I'm loving the hat. It even like shields the sun when it's too sunny out here. So he says, let's talk about 11 signs of victimization, of narcissistic abuse. So imagine this. Your entire reality has been warped and distorted. You have been mercilessly violated, manipulated, lied to, ridiculed, demeaned, and gaslit into believing that you are imagining things. The person you thought you knew and the life you built together has been shattered into a million little fragments. So your sense of yourself has been eroded, diminished even. You were idolized, you were devalued, then shoved off the pedestal. Perhaps you were even replaced and discarded multiple times, only to be hoovered. A form of emotional abuse is what it is that occurs when someone feels threatened by another person withdrawing or leaving a relationship. I'm going to keep it as appropriate as I can from my personal experience of my ex-husband. So he would lure back into an abuse cycle. He was torturous. And it got worse the more I wanted to get away from him. So maybe you were relentlessly stalked, harassed, bullied to stay with your abuser. This was no normal breakup or relationship. The sad part, too, is if you have children, they definitely use your children as well. I'm not going to get into... So I have some notes here because the next chapter I did was triangulation. But for now, we'll go with, this is a setup for covert and insidious murder of your psyche and a sense of safety in the world. Yet they may not be visible scars to tell the tale. So all you have are broken pieces, fractured memories, and internal battle wounds. This is what narcissistic abuse looks like, okay? It's psychological violence by malignant narcissists. It includes verbal and emotional abuse. It's toxic projection. It's stonewalling, sabotage, smear campaigns, triangulation, like I mentioned, along with a plethora of other forms of coercion and control. This is imposed by someone who lacks empathy, demonstrates an excessive sense of entitlement, and engages in interpersonal exploitation to meet their own needs at the expense and even the rights of others. As a result of chronic abuse, victims may struggle with symptoms of PTSD, complex PTSD, if they have additional traumas like being abused by narcissistic parents, or even what is known as, let's call it narcissistic victim syndrome. And that can and is yourself and your children. So the aftermath of narcissistic abuse can include depression, anxiety, hypervigilance, a persuasive sense of toxic shame, emotional flashbacks that regress the victim back to the abusive incidents, and overwhelming feelings of hopelessness and worthlessness. We are in the midst of an ongoing abuse cycle. It can be difficult to pinpoint exactly what we're experiencing because abusers are able to twist and turn reality to suit their own needs, engage in intense love bombing after abusive incidents, and convince their victims that they are the ones that are the abusers. If you find yourself experiencing the 11 symptoms and you have been in a toxic relationship with a partner that disrespects, invalidates, and mistreats you, you may just have been terrorized by an emotional predator. So, number 1, you've experienced disassociation as a survival mechanism. You feel emotionally or even physically detached from your environment, experiencing disruptions in your memory, perceptions, consciousness, and sense of self. Disassociation is the essence of trauma. The overwhelming experience is split off and fragmented so that the emotions, sounds, images, thoughts, and physical sensations take on a life of their own. Disassociation can lead to emotional numbing in the face of horrific circumstances. Mind-numbing activities, obsessions, addictions, and repression may become a way of life because they give you an escape from your current reality. Your brain finds ways to emotionally block out the impact of your pain so you don't have to deal with the full terror of your circumstances. You may also develop traumatized inner parts that become disjointed from the personality you inhabit with your abuser or your loved ones. These inner parts can include the inner child parts that were never nurtured. The true anger and disgust you feel towards your abuser or parts of yourselves you feel cannot, or that you cannot express around them. It's integrating and reclaiming disassociated and disowned aspects of the personality, largely dependent on constructing a cohesive narrative, which allows for the assimilation of emotional, cognitive, and physiological realities. This inner integration is best done with the help of a trauma-informed therapist. Number 2, you walk on eggshells. A common symptom of trauma is avoiding anything that represents reliving the trauma, whether it be people, places, or activities that pose that threat. Whether it be your friend, your partner, your family member, coworker, or boss, you find yourself constantly watching what you say or do around this person, lest you incur their wrath, punishment, or become the object of their envy. However, you find that this does not work, and you still become the abuser's target whenever he or she feels entitled to use you as their emotional punching bag. So you become perpetually anxious about provoking your abuser in any way and may avoid confrontation or setting boundaries as a result. You may also extend your people-pleasing behavior outside of the abusive relationship, losing your ability to be spontaneous or assertive while navigating the outside world, especially with people who resemble or are associated with your abuser and the abuse. Number 3, you put aside your basic needs and desires, sacrificing your emotional and even your physical safety to please the abuser. You may have once been full of life, goal-driven and dream-oriented. Now you feel as if you are living just to fulfill the needs and agendas of another person. Once the narcissist's entire life seems to revolve around you, now your entire life revolves around them. You may have placed your goals, hobbies, friendships, and personal safety on the back burner just to ensure that your abuser feels satisfied in the relationship. Of course, you soon realize that he or she will never truly be satisfied, regardless of what you do or don't do. Number 4, you are struggling with health issues and so systematic symptoms that represent your psychological turmoil. You may have gained or lost a significant amount of weight, developed serious health issues that did not exist prior, and experienced even physical symptoms of pre-aging because the stress of chronic abuse, any type really, has sent your cortisol levels into overdrive. and your immune system has taken a severe hit, leaving you vulnerable to physical ailments and disease. You find yourself unable to sleep or experience terrifying nightmares when you do. So reliving the trauma through emotional or visual flashbacks that bring you back to the site of the original wounds. Number 5, you develop a persuasive sense of mistrust. Every person now represents a threat, and you find yourself becoming anxious about the intentions of others, especially having experienced the malicious actions of someone you once trusted. I have a narcissistic mother too. Unfortunately, I didn't even realize for years that I had it from both angles. So your usual caution becomes hypervigilance, since the narcissistic abuser has worked hard to gaslight you into believing that your experiences are invalid. You have had a hard time trusting anyone, including yourself. Number 6 is you experience suicidal ideation or self-harm, or have tendencies. Along with depression and anxiety may come an increased sense of hopelessness. Your circumstances feel unbearable and as if you cannot escape, even if you wanted to. You develop a sense of learned helplessness that makes you feel as if you don't wish to survive another day. You may even engage in self-harm as a way to cope. In fact, victims of intimate partner violence are twice as likely to attempt suicide, even multiple times. So this is the way abusers essentially commit murder without a trace. Number 7 is you self-isolate. Many abusers isolate their victims, but victims also isolate themselves because they feel ashamed about the abuse that they're experiencing. Given the victim blaming and misconceptions about emotional and psychological violence in society, victims may even be re-traumatized by law enforcement, family members, or friends, and the members of even the narcissist's circle, who might invalidate their perceptions of the abuse. So they fear no one will understand or believe them. So instead of reaching out for help, they decide to withdraw from others as a way to avoid judgment and retaliation from their abuser. Number 8, you find yourself comparing yourself to others, often to the extent of blaming yourself for the abuse. A narcissist abuser is highly skilled at manufacturing love triangles or bringing another person into the dynamic of the relationship to further terrorize the victim, i.e. my children or your children, or even one of your family members, if they're somehow had the ability to have a closer relationship with them than you, or even their own family members too, they can use. So as a result, victims of narcissistic abuse internalize the fear that they are not enough and may constantly strive to compete for the abuser's attention and approval. Victims may also compare themselves to others in happier, healthier relationships, or find themselves wondering why their abuser appears to treat complete strangers with more respect. This can send them down the trap door of wondering, why me, and stuck in an abyss of self-blame. The truth is, the abuser is the person who should be blamed. You are in no way responsible for being abused. Number 9, you self-sabotage and self-destruct. Victims often find themselves ruminating over the abuse and hearing the abuser's voice in their minds, amplifying their negative self-talk and tendency towards, self-sabotage. Malignant narcissists program and condition their victims to even self-destruct, sometimes even to the point of driving them to suicide. Due to the narcissist's covert and overt put-downs, verbal abuse, and hypercriticism, victims develop a tendency to punish themselves because they carry such toxic shame. They may sabotage their goals, dreams, and academic pursuits. The abuser has instilled in them a sense of worthlessness, and they begin to believe that they are undeserving even of good things. So number 10, you fear doing what you love and achieving success. Since many pathological predators are envious of their victims, they punish them for succeeding. These conditions their victims to associate their joys, interests, talents, and areas of success with cruel and callous treatment. This conditioning gets their victims to fear success, lest they may be met with reprisal and reprimand. As a result, victims become depressed, anxious, lack confidence, and they may hide from the spotlight and allow their abusers to steal the show again and again. Realize that your abuser is not undercutting your gifts because they truly believe you are inferior. It is because those gifts threaten their control over you. So 11 is you protect your abuser and even gaslight yourself. This I fear of children doing, even as they become adults, which I want to give a healthy help of the information to as many people as I can, because I want to save, relationships and people from not having that healing and those relationships that they should have, and the abuser to be removed from the situation entirely. So rationalizing, minimizing, and denying in itself, the abuse, it's often a survival's mechanism. Victims don't even realize sometimes they're in an abusive relationship, or they don't know how to get out of one. In order to reduce the cognitive dissonance that erupts when the person who claims to love you mistreats you, or your parent or your sibling, victim of abuse convince themselves that the abuser is really not all that bad, or that they must have done something to provoke the abuse. It is important to reduce this cognitive dissonance in the other direction by reading up on the narcissistic personality and abuse tactics. This way you are able to reconcile your current reality with the narcissist's false self by recognizing that the abusive personality, not the charming facade, is their true self. Remember that an intense trauma bond is often formed between victim and abuser because the victim is trained to rely on the abuser for his or her survival. Victims may protect their abusers from legal consequences, portray a happy image of the relationship, even like on social media, or overcompensate by sharing the blame of the abuse. But I have been narcissistically abused. Now what, you might ask yourself. Well, if you are currently in an abusive relationship of any kind, know that you are not alone, even if you feel like you are. There are millions of survivors all over the world who have experienced what you have. This form of psychological torment is not elusive to any gender, culture, social class, or even religion. The first step is becoming aware of the reality of your situation and validating it, even if your abuser attempts to gaslight you into believing otherwise. If you can, journal about the experiences, is what he tells me, which is why I wrote a book. You have been going through to begin acknowledging the realities of the abuse. Share the truth with a trusted mental health professional, domestic violence advocate, family member, friends, or fellow survivors. Begin to heal your body. All of it. The physical, the emotional, the spiritual, the well-being. Give it to God. Through modalities like trauma-focused yoga and mindfulness meditation, too practices that target the same parts of the brain often affected by trauma. Reach out for help if you're experiencing any of these symptoms, especially suicidal ideation. Consult a trauma-informed counselor who understands and can help guide you through the symptoms of trauma. The reality is, God does have a plan, because a true malignant narcissist, when they're stuck in so far of entitlement, they often will start to commit crimes, serious ones even. And so as you're trying to ask for help and you're weeding through the reality and you're trying to protect yourself and your children and, it comes out, and justice arrives. And you make a safety plan if you have concerns about your abuser getting violent, or while you're waiting for justice to prevail. It is not easy to leave an abusive relationship due to the intense trauma bonds that can develop. But the effects of trauma and their persuasive sense of helplessness and hopelessness can form as a result of the abuse, is my point. So yet you have to know that it is, in fact, possible. It's more than possible to leave and to begin the journey to no contact or low contact in the cases of co-parenting. Recovery from this form of abuse is challenging, but it is well worth paving the path back to freedom and putting the pieces back together. All right. See you guys later, okay? Bye.